Now, it used to be that we had a nice little mirror between the federal and state government, where the federal government decided that they were the ones who were going to set the rules for what is and isn't tax exempt, and the state set the rules for how corporate governance works, how corporations are operated. It was a nice little mirror. They each mirrored each other. Well, that mirror's gotten a bit distorted lately. Now states are starting to question a whole lot more about what really is exempt, and the federal government is starting to get more into the questions of how do you govern and operate corporations, including charitable corporations and trusts. Now, you know that there are a lot of politicians at the state and local level, as well as at the federal level, who think that there are some kings out there in the nonprofit sector. There are some people who are living like kings anyway, while the people they serve, students at universities, patients at hospitals, are struggling down at the bottom. And so they're looking at how they control compensation and other perks and benefits that are provided to the executives of nonprofits and to some extent foundations, although so far everything's been tied pretty much to those organizations that receive some level of government funding. So you see that in New York, they decided to limit compensation to about $199,000 for organizations that receive certain levels of government funding. Other states that are acting in this are Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey. New Hampshire folks tell me that they're more process-oriented. They're a lot worried about, they're very worried about hospital compensation, but they're hoping to work this out through process, not policy. Now, it's not just executive compensation that folks are worried about. They're also wondering about what's going on in the boardrooms of nonprofits and foundations. 2 years ago, Blue Cross Blue Shield in Massachusetts got some unpleasant headlines when they offered a fairly nice compensation package to a departing board member. And that attracted the attention of some legislators and the Attorney General of Massachusetts, who said, well, here in Massachusetts, we don't pay board members unless the Attorney General says it's okay. And so Blue Cross suspended the payment. We've seen the legislation last year pass the Massachusetts Senate to ban board compensation without that special dispensation from the AG. And it's did not pass the House. It's back again this year. And now that Blue Cross Blue Shield has decided to start paying its board members again, we need to watch that legislation carefully. Now, it's not all negative. There are many states, state regulators and attorneys general and legislators as well that are interested in helping nonprofit boards. Now, some might think this is an intrusion, but they're looking at education, how they can support through their websites and other kinds of tools. The leader in this, again, is New York, one of the most active charity regulation and overseers in the country. And they have got legislation that's moving through right now that would create a program called New York on Board and Directors U, which a number of universities there around New York State are participating in. And I'm telling you, there are lots of state charity offices and attorneys general around the country and secretaries of state that are saying, oh, I want some of that. We can use that out there in Colorado. We can use it in Minnesota. We're looking at that all over the country, and so watch for more education. Now, in addition to those issues, the obvious big question is, what is tax exempt? I would say that that's the #1 thing at the state level. We've all heard about pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, with Boston as the leader there. Interesting development just up the road in Pittsboro, Massachusetts. A special committee put together by the mayor said, we're not so sure pilots would work up here in Pittsboro. We're not sure that the nonprofits can afford that. In Pennsylvania, there's lots of battles going on over what is purely public charity and therefore qualified for property tax exemption. And in Madison, Wisconsin, they're sitting there saying, you know what, we got too many nonprofits here. We can't afford to exempt them all from property taxes. Now, it's not just the federal level that's worried about what kinds of tax incentives we ought to be providing to encourage charitable giving. We all know that people are writing those checks, and not because of the tax system, but the size of that check and when they write it is very much influenced. Now, 3 years ago, New York State again implemented a plan since 2010. They have limited the deduction for charitable contributions for people earning over $10 million to 25% of their revenue. Now, Hawaii took that number and went a little further and said that we are also looking at a 25% limitation if you make $100,000. But if you make over $100,000, it's a lot less than 25%, and they limit it to $25,000. They're looking to overturn that now and doing something that we're thinking about on the federal level, exempting charitable contributions from the limit, not changing the limits, but exempting charitable contributions. You should also be aware that there are 7 states that currently have no income tax and therefore no incentives for giving, at least as far as a tax incentive, and governors in 10 other states are looking at shifting their tax system from income tax to either a sales tax or other kind of consumption taxes. So we're going to have to watch carefully to see the effects. Now, while you're here, you're also aware that we're looking at a lot of government cuts, just as we heard this morning. And that is trickling down to state and federal level, and we're seeing more closed signs on the doors of nonprofit organizations. Now, many foundations don't think that it's their role or it's appropriate for them to get involved in these discussions. At the same time, you need to be aware of it because it will affect how far your money goes and whether or not you're going to be asked to be a lifeline for organizations working in your community or in the causes that you care about. So where does it all end? It's not just the Hill here in Washington, it's the Hill back in your own states. This is where it starts. Continue to work with your colleagues, your state associations of nonprofits, your regional associations of grant makers. Visit your state house, visit your state charity regulators, and your city and county officials. They too need to know how much value you're adding to the lives of all the people in your community. Thanks.